Hey everybody, this is Chris Coli. Welcome back to the CrossWinds Church More Than Sunday podcast. I am excited for you today. We are on episode 34 of this thing, and at some point you can tell we're starting to kind of run out of coronavirus-related material, and so we've been doing Get to Know a Volunteer. We've been talking about what our trip to Austin was like. We're tackling tough questions. All of those are fun. I asked Andrea if she would sit down with us and tell us a little bit of the story of how in the world she got cast in a Las Vegas improv comedy show back before we moved here to the Bay Area. Some of you don't know that story, and we thought it would be fun for her to kind of tell part of it. So hope you find this interesting. Enjoy this. All right, I'm here with Andrea.
What about your big greeting? You yelled at me that one time for not doing it right. And now you're just like, hey, we're here.
You are so loud. You're so close
loud
to the microphone and loud.
Listen, I gotta be me.
I feel like there's a couple things we need to say before we get started. We have a reverse osmosis here in our kitchen, and you can hear the trickle of it in the background. I can hear it through these headphones right now.
You're like, who is it that had the really good listening skills? Bionic woman or bionic man?
I don't know.
One of them could hear things and one of them could see things.
I think I remember that.
I like to bring up the bionic duo once per podcast.
With all of these. If we talked about them before.
Yes, Steve Austin.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, hey, Andrea, welcome back to the podcast. You spoke this last weekend, and we talked about doing a podcast with you today where we would actually talk to you about joy. And then as I said, do you have anything more you could share with us on the podcast about that?
Right.
I believe your words were?
I've said everything I can say. Unlike you, who apparently does a lot more research than I do and leaves a lot unsaid.
That's not true.
I don't leave anything unsaid.
Yeah, I don't think that's what I'm trying to say. I just think it's funny that you had nothing left on the topic. So I actually thought a cool thing to do would be for our church who are listening to this thing to hear about your time in Las Vegas working on the Las Vegas Strip, because you don't talk about this a whole lot. I mean, I know you wrote a book about it for sale right now on Amazon. No, but actually it is. If anybody cares to read it, it's called Scriptless. But
that's right. That's the subtitle. If anybody cares to read it.
No, it is. The book is actually about your time doing improv sketch comedy on the Las Vegas Strip, and then the lessons you learned about your spiritual life from that time, right? That's what that's about. But rather than that, I think it would just be fun for people to hear how in the world you became part of the Second City. For those who don't know, maybe you should explain what the Second City is.
Well, maybe you should explain what the Second City is, because I didn't know what the Second City was until you told me. We had been married for like a year, and we had moved to the Detroit area, Michigan.
Right.
And in Detroit, there was one of what I think were about 5 Second City theaters throughout the United States and Canada.
Right.
Maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think there was one in Toronto.
Yeah.
That's a big one. The one in Chicago, which is the original one. Las Vegas, Los Angeles. I think there were 4. I don't remember if there. Oh, and then Detroit.
I feel like there was. Anyway, and so maybe we went to a show. Anyway, you grew up going to the Second City, so you actually taught me about it.
All right. So I'll give a little bit of background. Second City was a huge sketch comedy club, I guess you'd call it, venue, company that was in downtown Chicago, over in the Lincoln Park area. Man, loved going down to that when I was in like high school. In fact, they opened one up in the suburbs near where I grew up, like just down the way from my very favorite Chicago style deep dish pizza place. Anyway, and so I would go, and you guys, when I was in high school, I saw Steve Carell from like The Office doing sketch comedy, and his buddy Stephen Colbert there doing sketch comedy, and Rachel Dratch, some of you know who that is from Saturday Night Live, and lots of wonderful people doing great sketch comedy. And that's what Second City is known for. Tons of Incredible people came out of there. Bill Murray, Chris Farley, Tina Fey, lots of wonderful people all came out of Second City. So Andrea had always been involved in drama when we met in like Los Angeles and at the church we were a part of. Is that right?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And so we moved to Detroit, and I was like, oh my gosh, Andrea, they opened up a Second City here in Detroit. Let's go down there and see some shows. And so we did. We'd go down every once in a while. We were living in like the suburbs of Detroit, I should say.
Right.
And what caused you to want to go?
Well, somehow we found out that they had like classes. They had classes, and then they also had sort of higher level classes called the conservatory, and you had to audition to get into that, to get in. Yeah. And so you kind of encouraged me to do it. And I thought, yeah, that's a great idea, because I wanted to do more speaking. I was already on the drama team. It's always good to do anything that can get you better at being on stage. Yeah. Why not? What do I have to lose?
And I think for you, another thing was that I was a pastor at a church. And you were working at a meat processing company.
No, at that time I was. Oh yeah, I was.
You were. That's it. You were.
I can't keep my job straight.
You were a customer care director at like a Fortune 500 company,
right?
That is now like Tyson Foods and a bunch of other things, Tyson, but it's been bought out 5 times since then. But
we digress.
Anyway, your thought was, hey, this would actually be a cool way to meet some people who are not Christians, right? Like to build some relationships.
We had been in Michigan only for maybe like less than a year, I want to say. Yeah. And so, yeah, for sure. And that definitely happened.
Which is one of the things I love about you, that you would get very strategic and intentional about going and doing that. So, okay. So you went down, you took classes, and who were your instructors? Anybody we've heard of?
And oh yeah. I got confused. Yeah. Keegan Michael Key. Oh my gosh. I'm terrible with names. You know that.
Yeah.
Keegan Michael Key. Some of you know him from Key and Peele.
Yes.
Or from all the bunch of things he's in.
The million things he's in these days.
I'm sure he doesn't remember me. I clearly barely remember his name correctly, but he was one of my instructors.
Yeah.
So for like a year and a half, almost 2 years, I went through these levels in this conservatory, where by the time you got toward the end, you were actually like putting on shows. Our shows were terrible.
Right.
They were so terrible because they were all
too bad.
Yeah, they were, because they were all like trying to grow us and stretch us. And so no joke, this one show, they had us show up an hour before the show started.
Yeah.
And that's when we planned our show.
And that's the idea.
Yeah, except for they had a strategy, which was we were all supposed to bring, I want to say newspapers, because we didn't have phones that went, I mean, we did maybe, I don't know, whatever. And we were supposed to look at newspapers, find headlines, and come up with sketch ideas based on them. And like literally right before the show. Yeah. And so it was meant to, I shouldn't say it was meant to be a disaster, but it's meant to just totally stretch you.
Yeah.
And that's what it did. And I just remember doing this one scene, and the whole audience had no idea what we were doing.
Yes.
And it was funny only in hindsight. Anyway.
Yeah. So what happened was, you're in this conservatory, and the nature of the conservatory is most of the people who are in your cast or your classes, they're all wanting to become the next stars of Saturday Night Live.
Right.
Everybody
all of them.
wants to be a professional actor, comedian, sketch comic. Right. That's what they're all hoping for.
Right. And and in the case of Keegan, obviously he did. That was his start.
No
that's
doubt.
what they're all trying to do.
You, in the middle of all of this, I just want to go back to working at a church.
I wasn't called to that. It's funny because when I finally ended up quitting, was when our shows were on Wednesday nights.
Yes.
And I had then gotten hired as a pastor at the church.
Right.
And we had services on Wednesday nights. And I was like, I can't never go.
Oh, well.
And I remember my instructor at the time was just like really pushed back on that. And I was like,
you're gifted. You're good at this.
What I'm called to do.
Right. So that kind of wound down. I mean, I think you were pregnant with
almost
Quinn.
2 years. No, not yet.
Not yet?
But it was another It was like another 2 years we were in Michigan.
Okay.
And we moved when she was
really
like
2 more years
old.
after that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, long story short, and I don't know that I've made it short.
Fail.
We moved to Las Vegas, and within like a month or two of getting there, you get a call from some friends back in Detroit.
Yeah, who are like, hey, have you heard about this new show they're auditioning for in Las Vegas? And I'm like, what? No. Because I had just had a baby. I didn't hear anything.
And Second City had already had a show at the Flamingo.
Yeah, a sketch show.
A sketch show, which when we say that, we mean it's pre-written sketches like Saturday Night Live. Somebody, by the way, sorry for the piano you're hearing in the background.
Oh yeah, a lot of sounds going on here.
The reverse osmosis and the piano. But anyway, that's it's kind of a pre-written show. In fact, that show was written by Jason Sudeikis and Kay Cannon, who was his wife at the time, who was
not yet his wife, but
no
longer now his wife.
Sorry, his fiance, his girlfriend at the time. They met in the show. Whatever. The two of the people who wrote the show. She wrote Mean Girls. No. Tina Fey wrote Mean Girls. Kay Cannon ended up writing Pitch Perfect.
Pitch Perfect.
Yeah. I don't know if she wrote Pitch Perfect 2 and 3.
She was involved, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway,
yeah.
So in addition to the regular sketch show, they were starting a brand new show, which was, I think, the only one like it in all of the companies throughout that we talked about.
Right.
That was an all improvised show.
Right.
Like Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yes.
So they were doing a brand new show, an inaugural cast. Everything was fresh and new. And so people were coming, including friends of mine from Detroit, coming out to audition.
People from Detroit, people from Chicago, people
New
from
York,
Toronto,
San Francisco,
Los Angeles,
LA,
all over. Yeah. People are like, "Oh man, if I can get into the cast." So somebody calls you and goes, "Oh, you live there? Are you auditioning?"
And you're like, he was coming out,
right? Yeah, it was Chris, right? And
Chris.
He calls you and says, "Are you going to?" You're like, "I don't even know about this."
Right. So I called down. You had to get approved to audition. Like
you did?
You had to have certain experience.
Okay.
But I was like, well, I did the conservatory in Detroit. And she's like, oh, okay. And what's funny is we lived about 9 minutes away from the theater.
The Bugsy Siegel Theater in the Flamingo. Am I correct? and just out of curiosity, what was on in the theater after your show?
Well, at first, I don't know what it was, but then it changed. I think what you're thinking of is the burlesque show that went on after.
Yes.
And it used to not be anything.
There would be a stripper pole in there.
Weird, yeah. No, it used to not be anything because it used to be that Second City did like an 8 show and a 10:30 show or something like that. But then, I don't know, it got weird. I don't know.
The nature of Las Vegas is things are always changing. Yeah. So you go and audition for this, and
so I auditioned, and it was crazy because I got cast, and it was a very small number of people, and there were all these people that had come from all over, and my friend who came out didn't get cast, and that was sad.
Yeah.
But I mean, I went on to meet some really incredible people in that cast who, I mean, still, we're in touch, and I'm just amazed by their level of skill. And even in that cast, I felt a little bit like the oddball because most of them were sort of going that direction. And most of them had other day jobs in the industry, the entertainment industry.
Right.
I was the weird one who had a baby and, my husband was a pastor. It was just,
it's totally
all
true.
That stuff.
And so you would, it was fun. I would work during the day as you would watch Quinn. And then I would come home at night and watch Quinn while you would go down to the Las Vegas Strip and you would do sometimes 2 shows a night, sometimes 1 show a night. The other part of this was that you were an understudy for the sketch comedy show that was not improvised, right?
Right. All of us in the improvised show were understudies.
Yeah.
And the way they did it is you had a certain person, obviously, that you would understudy, but they only had 2 women in the main cast.
Right.
So I, for most of the time, understudied both of those women.
Yeah.
And that was in some ways so much fun because in improv, you just never know. You never know what it's going to be. It's going to be good, when people are going to laugh, if they're going to laugh.
Most of the time, it was really good. I loved going.
It was.
Hilarious.
We definitely we had an amazing director, and we did have some really great shows. We really did. I was lucky to be a part of that. But there's a comfort in knowing, like, all right, this is the line that's going to get the big laugh.
Right.
This is the part where this happens. So I really enjoyed doing the scripted shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I didn't mess up that much.
And you were good at those too. All right. Well, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark here. That's as long as we like to try to go on these podcasts. What I would say is, if we could get you to do it, it would be fun to come back on and have you tell us some more. Now that we know how you got to it, tell us some of the stories of what it was like to be in it. I think that would be fun. You open to that?
I am open to that. I feel like you've put me on the spot here.
That's a lot of what I do on this. I don't tell people
main
what I'm
strategy.
Yes. We improvise this.
What?
Yeah. All right, Andrea. Thanks for doing this. Everybody, thanks for listening. And you can tell we're running out of podcast topics.
You should have people suggest things.
You know what? We have had a number of call-ins and write-ins. This is episode 34 that we are recording. Crazy. It's pretty wild. We're trying to do one every single weekday. And at this point, the first couple of weeks, it was really easy to be like, oh, I know what we should do. And a lot of them were so coronavirus themed. At this point, we are still doing some of that, but I think we're just trying to stay engaged and making sure we're communicating with each other at church. So anyway, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody.